Hi lovelies, it's MLP with Lovely Lulu Designs, and in this video I'm going to be showing you a tutorial on how to make a Whirlpool Mermaid Tumbler. This design was initially inspired by the Gypsy Leopard style by Jessica Flynn of Flynn Sisters Boutique, but has been adapted for more of a mermaid and water theme. I will be providing links for everything I used for this technique in the description down below. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. So after you're finished prepping your cup, which is sanding and spray painting it, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to cut your scales. So if you need scales and you're looking for some, I do sell some in my shop, which is Lovely Lulu Designs in Etsy. It is all one word to find it. I have a couple of different scale options for the cardstock. They are both SVG. Just so you know, so you have to have a Cricut or you have to have the Silhouette Business Edition in order to cut that. I believe there is some online stuff you can go onto and convert from an SVG to a Silhouette Basic compatible file, but I'm not 100% sure because I haven't needed it. So this here is the one that I'm going to be choosing to do. It's going to be the one that's a little pointier. I prefer this one for adult cups. For kids cups, I usually like the rounded off bottom scales, but that's just personal preference. So I'm going to go into my Cricut and I'm going to upload my image. So I go to upload image, I'm going to browse, and once you've downloaded the file to your computer, you're going to find it in your download section. So I've got two different versions of the file. There's a 12 by 12 and there's an 8.5 and 11. So basically what this means is that these scales will fit a 12 by 12 sheet of cardstock, and these scales are designed to fit an 8.5 by 11 sheet of cardstock. I am using 8.5 by 11. It's what I have in stock right now. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to hit open. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to insert the image after I've selected it. Okay, so a couple things about this file if you're going to use this one. They're only grouped together, they're not attached, and I did that because if you don't need to use all of them, you could easily separate them and just delete whatever you didn't need. So I wanted to make it easy for you guys. So if I was just going to use them like this, I would attach them first, which is right down here, and then I would bring it to my cut area. That's a large file, so I was thinking about it. And then I would make it. However, I'm going to do something else to it first. So I'm going to detach it. And the first thing is, because I'm not doing the scales on the entire cup, I want to bring it down in size just a little bit. Again, this is totally optional. You don't have to do this. You can leave the scales as is. But I bring the width down to 6.85. I like them a little smaller because I don't have, like I said, I'm not covering the whole cup. I'm only doing a couple rows. So I wanted to be able to fit some more scales in there to get a little bit more of that texture. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to take a square. I'm going to unlock my square and I'm just going to bring it so that it's longer than this bottom row right here. I'm going to ungroup all of my scales, and I'm going to take my little rectangle and the bottom row, so I'm going to hit shift. I've already got this selected. I'm going to hit shift and I'm going to select the bottom row so it selects both of those rows, and then hold on, take this one. I'm going to weld that together first. I have to make it one solid item. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to take my rectangle and I am going to slice it. And then what I can do is I can delete what I don't need. And the reason why I did this was because I like to put a flat scale on the very bottom ridge of my cup. Now again, that is fully optional. That's not something you need to do. After I've laid my scales, I'm also going to go back, and when I know how much space I have between a little bit below the rim of my cup, because I want to make sure I'm leaving enough of a rim for a seal, and my second last row of scales, I'm very likely going to need to slice another row of these as well. But I'm going to wait until I know where I need to slice that, because whenever I lay them, it always lays a little bit differently. So I want to make that accurate and custom to each cup that I do. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of my scales. I'm going to select attach and let it think about it for a second. And then if you want, you can save this project so that if you plan on making more than one, you don't have to repeat this process. You just go save. But I've actually already saved this this way. I just wanted to show you. Now I would go to make it, and I would put my cardstock down on my mat. And from there, I will just cut my project. So I would just hit continue. And I'm not connected to my machine right now because I'm upstairs. But that's how you're going to cut your scales. So that's the first thing that you need to do. I finished cutting my scales. I used white 100-pound cardstock. The first time I made these with the 100-pound cardstock was actually just because it was all that I had in my drawer. I usually would use 60 or even 80-pound cardstock to do scales on a mermaid tumbler, but it was all that I had, so I figured I would use it. And I think it was a happy accident because I really liked the depth and the texture that the extra weight of the paper gave me. So I used the 100-pound. I have a Cricut maker, and I used the poster board setting for that. You want to make sure when you're cutting your scales that your blade is pretty sharp, and also that your mat's pretty sticky. This mat here isn't really so sticky anymore, so I had some shifting. I lost kind of the top part here of the scale where I didn't have my paper pressed really firmly down on the paper enough. So that's sort of an extra little tip there for you for when you're cutting the thicker cardstocks. I used white because I am going to be using a white base on my scale, but it's not necessary that you use white. If you don't have white, that's fine. You can use whatever color you want. You also don't have to do the same scale that I'm doing, but if you want to follow along, it still doesn't really matter because I'm going to be spray painting them once I'm done sealing them anyway. But for me, it's easier, well, for everyone, it's easier to cover white with white. You use less spray paint, it's less coats. So that is what I do for that. So I just leave them for now on my cutting mat. Another thing to keep in mind is that, I might have mentioned this in the last video, but when I am when I'm applying the scales to the top of my tumbler, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be cutting off the edge of the tops of them. And I'm actually going to go back to my computer and do it the same way I did where I cut the bottoms, only cutting from the top, because I want to make sure that I'm leaving a rim between the cardstock and like some stainless steel, between the cardstock and the top of the tumbler. Treat cardstock just like you would fabric. You want to make sure you seal it really well before you epoxy it, and you want to make sure that you're leaving a rim for your epoxy to provide a proper seal. If you put the cardstock right up to the edge, you're not going to be able to properly seal the top of this cup. So that's for the scales. Just going to move them to the side for now. My tumbler is a fully prepped tumbler, which means I have sanded, cleaned, and spray painted it. If you have not yet had a chance to watch my video on how to properly sand a tumbler and how to know it is properly sanded and why it is important to do that, and that's something that you have questions about, I'm going to post a link to that right here so you can go back and check that out. I did spray paint a swirl on this. It's not necessary to spray paint the swirl. This is more just kind of like sketching out a guideline of how I think that the scales are going to sit. But when it comes to actually laying the scales are not flexible. They are a fixed shape and size, and they are the same shape and size for each scale. So when I start putting the scales on the tumbler, they're going to let me know exactly what path they're going to take. So I may need to course correct. Again, this was just kind of a sketch to sort of outline where I think it's going to go. So the way that I apply my scales, I used to use Mod Podge, but I personally found that to be really, really messy, and it took a super long time. So I don't like to use Mod Podge anymore. I like to use double-sided tape now. This is the 15mm double-sided tape from Cat Glitter Factory. She sells 5mm, 10mm, and 15mm sizes. I like to use the largest size. If you're unfamiliar with working with double-sided tape, it is exactly what it sounds like. It is sticky on both sides. So when you first get your tape, there's like a protective backing paper on the outer side of the tape. And then when you kind of pull that back, the tape is sticky here. So since it has the sticky side, to measure how long I need to cut my tape, I am going to just sort of take it and follow that swirl, and making sure that I'm kind of going above the rim and above the bottom So I have enough. I will measure it like that, take my scissors, cut my piece off, and then I have the proper length. So I'm just going to start laying this down now. You don't have to worry about laying it down too perfectly. If you have a bubble or something pop up in your tape, that's going to be fine. And this isn't like if you're going to be glittering it, you're not going to be glittering on this. You're going to be putting the cardstock. So that's not going to be an issue at all. So if you see here, I have those, like kind of ripples here. I'm not worried about that. That's going to get totally covered by the scale. And then once I've got it on here, I'm just going to take my scissors and I will trim the top. And then I will trim the bottom. And I'm going to save these pieces in case I need to add some some double-sided tape to the cup to adhere some more scales later. So that's the first. So when I'm making my tumblers, I lay 6 rows of scales with the idea that the outer 2 on either side is going to help blend my glitter into the scale. So I'm actually going to lay down 6 rows of the double-sided tape. So I'm going to repeat that process for each piece of tape. I'm going to measure it, cut it, and apply it. When I'm laying the next row for the tape, what I want to do is I want to lay it close to the previous tape line, but I don't want to overlap it. I want to leave just a little bit of a gap. And the reason for that is because when I'm pulling the next, when I'm pulling the backing paper off of the tape, I don't want to be pulling it from underneath the other tape that I laid next to it, if that makes any sense. So here I kind of missed a little bit on the bottom. So I'm just gonna take a piece right there and fill that little gap. And then I will trim from the top. So I'm going to show you up close what I mean, how I've left that little gap between the two of them. So in this way I can pull back this backing paper without lifting the piece of tape that I had here. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you are laying your tape down, if you pull your tape too tight, you will rip your tape. And that's not, the end of the world if that happens. You can just pick up where you left off, but it's just something that, can kind of surprise you or that you weren't expecting. So just be aware that if you're pulling too tight, you might rip your tape. And I've done that many times. It makes no difference in this technique, again, because you're covering it with 100-pound cardstock, so it's not going to show through that you did that. Now I have all 6 rows of the transfer tape on here. You'll notice in a couple spots I've added a little piece to patch it where I had a little bit of a gap between them, and that's, again, not a problem because we're just going to be covering it anyway. The bubbles are not a problem. We're going to be covering all of this anyway. The fact that it hangs over the edges a little bit is not a problem. We can just flatten that down, and we're going to be covering all of that anyway. So this part here is very, very forgiving part of the process. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start peeling back that backing paper and exposing the other side of the tape. And then with whatever is just sort of sticking up on the top, I'm just going to push that down over the rim like that. So now you want to be a little more aware of where you're placing your fingers on your tumbler. You don't want to be touching the tape too much, just pushing down a couple little bubbles there. But that is sort of where we get started. So now we are ready to start applying the scales. So I work my way from the bottom to the top, and I'm going to try something a little bit different. I've found in the past that when I've started my scale right on the edge, I've had to course correct a full row sort of by the time I get to about the third or fourth row of scales. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of measure one scale in from the edge and start it there and see if that prevents that course correction. And I'm going to just lay it down so that it's nice and straight with the bottom of my tumbler. I'm going to take my next one and I'm going to ever so slightly overlap it with the other scale. So you can see that little overlap there, and I'm going to try to keep it in line and straight. So if you kind of just lightly press it on, you can kind of play with it a little bit still in terms of angle and placement. But once you've kind of pressed it down, you're sort of committing to it. You don't really want to be pulling it off and playing around with it at that point. So that's my second scale. And I'm going to repeat that process on that bottom row. Okay, so there we have our first row. It's pretty straight. It doesn't have to be completely perfect because, again, like nothing in nature is perfect. But we've got our 6 rows over. This row and your next row are going to be pretty important because they're going to kind of lay out the direction and the spacing of the rest of your scales. So you want to take special care on these first 2 rows. So on this row here, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the middle point to the point that's made here between these two. And I'm going to bring it in just so that it is just below the line of the bottom scale. And then I'm going to press it on. And to make sure that you line them up properly, you're always going to line this tip to the tip in the middle here, and you're going to want to line these points on the side with each other. And there should be some overlap between your scales. This will allow for a little bit of give. You don't want to just have them placed perfectly in, because if you misplace anything, you're going to notice a big gap. If you do lay your scales and you have a couple that are gappy, you can use those ones as the scales that you will put glitter on, and it will kind of hide that. But for the most part, just try to get them as straight and as filled as you can accurately, so that way you're not sort of being told by the cup which cups or which scales you need to be decorating. You can kind of decide yourself, which is kind of a nice thing. Allow your creative juices to flow instead of having the cup dictate that for you. But you can fix things. That's the good news. All right, so now I've got my first 2 rows down. So I'm going to repeat this process up until I'm about as high as I can go on this cup without worrying about the top of the cup and the top of the scale. What I'm noticing right here is that if I were to lay a scale here, I would have a lot that wouldn't have any tape on it. So this is that course correction that I was talking about that I might have to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lay another piece of tape from here all the way up to the top part of my tumbler. So I did cut an extra piece earlier just in case that would happen. So I'm just going to flip this around, and starting from this scale, I'm just going to work my way, follow that swirl. Okay, so I'm now getting close to my tumbler. So you see here how close I am to that rim. So if I were to just take another scale and lay it down next to that, I would have an issue where I couldn't get this to seal. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to my machine and I'm going to slice off the top part of another row of scales. And I'm also going to quickly see if I need to do, yeah, and then I need to give myself just a little bit for a tip on another one as well. So I'm going to go do those 2 rows, pop these off. I didn't press them down hard. And I will be back to show you how I lay those down. All right, so I've printed my scales to do my top 2 rows. So I'm going to lay them the same way that I did the others. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm leaving just a small rim of stainless steel between the top of the scale and the top of the tumbler. So that's my top line. So you can see that. So there is that rim. It's pretty straight and it's filled in with the scales. So I'm going to show you now the one that I was working on yesterday. You can see that where my scales were cut off was very different from where they were cut off on this tumbler. And that is why I don't pre-cut that top rim. I customize that for every cup. It's just those small attention, like fine attention to details, that will make your work stand out from someone else's. So now that my scales are completely on my tumbler, the next thing I need to do, if you remember I said you need to treat cardstock just like you would fabric, is I am going to be sealing this, and I use Quick Coat to do that. You can use Mod Podge. If you use Mod Podge, you'll need to use about 5 coats. If you're using the Quick Coat, you need to use only 2. So I like to use Quick Coat for that. As well, I do a pretty thick coat on these. So once I am done applying it, I will pop it on my turner to spin, because I don't want it to be pooling anywhere where it shouldn't be. Just like you don't want epoxy to be pooling anywhere, I want it to be like nice and evenly spread when it dries. So I'm going to take my Quick Coat, and Quick Coat is a CC DIY product, and at the very least at the time of this recording, the exclusive distributor for CC DIY products in Canada is Amy from M & Cat Glitter Factory. So if you're interested in this product and you don't already have it in your inventory, that is where you can find it, and I will provide a link for that in the comments as well. So I'm just going to take some and squirt it out into my little bowl here. Whatever I don't use in here, I will pour back into my bottle, okay? I know this stuff is a little bit pricey, so I don't want to waste any of it. And as always, you're going to notice that I'm going to apply it with my trusty Taklon brush. If you haven't already seen me use it in some of my videos, I use these brushes all the time when I'm applying Mod Podge for glitter, or when I am using sealer, because it gives you nice even coverage and very minimal brush strokes. So what's important to keep in mind with your first coat of sealer is that you want to be going with the grain of the scales. You don't want to do a lot of back brushing, because you don't want to be lifting the scales up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my brush nice and saturated. I'm going to start from around the lip, and I'm going to start at the top part of the tumbler, and I am going to make sure that I am covering and saturating every single scale. Again, you're going to notice at this point I am not back brushing. I'm just going in one direction with the scales. Just going to go around the edges, make sure I've gotten every single edge. And now I'm just going to go completely with the grain of the scale and with the direction of the swirl, and just make sure that I don't have any excess sealer sort of hanging around. Now, at this point, what I would do is, if you remember what I said about one of the downfalls of the 100-pound cardstock was that it wasn't very flexible. Now that you've got the quick coat on it, it is a lot more pliable because it's wet. What I would do now is I would look around my tumbler, and if I had any scale that was sticking up, that it didn't look like the double-sided tape had laid it down, I would take a small brush and a small amount of Mod Podge, and I would put that underneath the scale and kind of use the back of the brush to press it down. I was going to show you an example of that, but honestly, mine are all laying down pretty good. So I actually don't need to do that on this tumbler this time around. But if you have that, you just want to take a small brush like this, a little bit of Mod Podge, stick it up and underneath where you're having the issue, and then take the back of your brush and press it on top of your scale and just press that scale down. Okay. So now I'm gonna, like I said, I'm just gonna put this on my turner, let it spin. Once this is dry, I am going to need to come back and I'm going to do a second coat. On my second coat, I'm going to do the same thing I did. I'm going to start by going with the grain of the scale. Then I'm going to back brush it to make sure that I've got sealer all here on this direction of the scale as well. And then I'll do one more time in the direction of the grain at the very end, like what I did at the end of this coat, just to make sure I don't have any areas where it's pooling. And then it will be sufficiently sealed for our next step. So I'm not going to do that part on camera. You guys have seen how I do that now. It's kind of pooling there. So I will be back then to show you guys what our next step is going to be after we've sealed the scales. All right, so I went back and I did that second coat of quick coat to seal my scale. So this has got 2 coats on it now. So now the next thing that I'm going to be doing is, as I mentioned earlier, even though it's white cardstock that I did my scales with, I am going to be going in and I'm going to be spray painting it with a white spray paint as well. I'm just going to be using a white flat white primer that I have. You can use any white that you want. Because this is a glossy surface, so I would recommend using a paint and primer at the very least, if not a primer. The reason why I'm spray painting it white is because I want to have even color through the scales to start off with. So you can see here that, you know, like there were some things that kind of got on my scales while I was putting them on. So I want to kind of eliminate those by just starting with the white base, a solid white base. So I'm going to go do that. At this point in my spray painting, I am going to be concerned about drips. I don't want to have any drips showing up because the chameleon flakes that I use are translucent, so they're not going to hide things like drips. It's going to be a texture that you're going to see. So I want to try to avoid that. So if you are someone who's having an issue with spray painting and drips and you haven't yet had a chance to check out my video on how to spray paint a tumbler without getting drips, I will link that here to help you guys out with that. So I'm not going to show that on camera right now. I'm just going to go do that, and then when I come back, I will show you the next step. My tumbler is painted white and the spray paint is now dry, so now I can move on to my next step, which is applying the adhesive. I use chameleon flakes to decorate my tumblers, and to apply those chameleon flakes I use Aleene's Tack-It Over and Over. You do not have to use this exact brand, but what you're looking for is you're looking for a repositionable adhesive. There are repositionable spray adhesives, there are brush-on ones like this, but that's the key. You need it to be a repositionable adhesive, so make sure that your bottle says that when you purchase it. Usually with the Tack-It over and over, what most people do is they will mix about 50-50 Tack-It with water. Some people do more 75% Tack-It, 25% water. I eyeball mine, I don't measure it, but it's probably closer to the 50-50. I think maybe more like 60-40, with 40% water, 60% the Tack-It. And I just keep it in a little container with a lid on it. And you'll notice right now that it doesn't look so good. The water has separated from the glue. So all that I have to do is I just take my little stir stick and I combine that water and the glue back in together, and it's good to use again. So if you just use a reusable container, you can just kind of keep it off to the side and just keep remixing it back in, no problem. So that's another little frugal tip for you. Don't have much left, but I have enough. Like, a little goes a long way with this stuff too. I mean, I've had this bottle for quite a while. So there, it's mixed back in. And then I will just take a cloth and I'll wipe that off with some acetone when I have a cloth. I don't have one here right now, so I'll clean that up later. As always, I am using my trusty Tack-On brush to apply it. It gives me nice smooth coverage, brush of choice. And I'm going to do the same thing that I originally did when I was sealing it, and I'm going to dip my brush in and I am going to just cover my scales, going with the grain of the scale. And the reason for that is because I don't want to have, if I'm back brushing, I'm probably going to get buildup along the scales as it drags back. As long as you can do that, but as long as you clean it up after, so the last stroke is like this, that's fine. You just don't want to have too much of a buildup anywhere, because then it will have a bit of a different look and coverage with your chameleon scales, because they are transparent, so you are going to be seeing what's below them. So what a repositionable glue is it basically means that it's going to dry tacky. And that's great for things like foil flakes. It's great for things like when you're using, when you're going to be burnishing glitter on a tumbler. And it's great for things like the chameleon flakes. If you have any excess on your brush, you can just wipe it away. You want to get rid of any buildup on the edges. And you also want to make sure that you're getting it between the cardstock and the rim, because you still want to be decorating that part. Now I'm just going to kind of look and see if I had any buildup anywhere. Because it's a thicker texture cardstock, I just want to clear off wherever I had the glue that left behind thicker. It will just make your life easier when you're applying the flakes. So that looks good. It's covered. I'm going to let this dry for about 20 minutes, and then when I come back, this will be tacky, and I can start to apply the chameleon flakes and show you how I do that. All right, so my Tack-It is now dry, which means my scales are sufficiently sticky. If you don't find that they're sticky enough, it's possible that you added too much water. You can always go in and do a second coat of Tack-It if you would like. It's not necessary though. For right now, I'm quite happy with how sticky my scales are. So what I do is I decorate my scales using chameleon flakes. I get my chameleon flakes also from M&Cat Glitter Factory. Traditionally, I have used the green, gold, and lilac. There it is. However, today I don't think I actually even have enough to do 1 cup with this. So I'm going to be using today the green, blue, gold, and oh, there it is, pink by M&Cat. So you do use quite a bit of them, I will be honest. And they are a bit more of a premium price on these. So because of that, I do add a premium material fee to this. Also, this part here is a little bit of a labor of love. It does take some time. So I recommend you sit down with a show that you like or with some music that you like, and you just kind of relax and enjoy yourself while you go through this next process. So I apply them with just a soft eyeshadow brush like this one here. And you might also want to wear a dust mask when you're working with these because they're very wispy. So they'll, if you sneeze, if you cough and you're doing it right over top of them, they're going to go absolutely everywhere. But basically this is what they look like. And by putting them on a white base and burnishing them on with my brush, it's going to give this kind of an effect, which is really, really pretty. It looks very much like a scale. It's got that nice opal shine to it. Okay, so to apply them, now it's up to you. You can, as you can see, when I do the scales, I'll show you this cup as a reference. There are some that I add glitter to. You can kind of pre-select your scales if you would like, and then not put your chameleon flakes on those to save product. I don't do that because I kind of build my pattern of the glittered scales as I go, and I'm not sure. It's kind of one of those like how I feel when I'm making it kind of things. So I don't have like a set pattern. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put the chameleon flakes on all of my scales. Also, I do put it on the outer scales, even though I'm going to be putting a lot of glitter on these scales, just so that if I am blending them in and I have scales exposed on this line, it's still consistent with these ones. So even though these are getting mostly covered, I want them to have that shimmer color. If you don't want to do that, that is fine. It is totally up to how you want to do this if you want to save on that material. So when I'm doing this, all that I'm doing is I take my flakes, I take my brush, I dab it in, and you're going to notice that they right away go like everywhere. And I just put some on my brush like that, and I take my cup and I just kind of dab it on where I want them. And you can see them just kind of fluttering all over the place. I also put down a non-sticky piece of, this is a grill mat. Glitter doesn't stick to it, epoxy doesn't stick to it. It's really easy to wipe clean. I got that at on Amazon as well. And it's really great because I can just sort of go on here and pick them up. So I clean my mat before, so that way I know I've got nothing else on here, so I can kind of scoop up some of those wispy pieces that sort of flew away on me. And then once I've kind of got some on, I just start rubbing it with my brush to kind of burnish them on. And I'll go through and I'll end up doing that a couple times until I have the coverage that I'm looking for. And I like literally I do scale by scale, row by row. So like I said, this is a more time consuming part of the process. So I'm definitely going to just sort of show you a couple and then speed it up or even kind of cut it once I've shown you, so you know. So there you go. There's the first 3 right there. Now I'm just going to keep on going. So I find that at the top where I've got the bigger flakes, it covers faster and better. As I get lower in my dish here, it doesn't get as much coverage. So when you're starting to run near the bottom, you're not going to get as much out of this. I use probably about 80% of one of these to do the 6 rows of scales, the way that I do them. So you do use quite a bit. And I think they're just under $7 a bottle. So the premium that I add is just to cover that material. I add a $5 premium on top of other premiums for this, because this is obviously this cup is more steps and a lot more in-depth and a lot more work than usual. So when you get to the rim of the cup, you want to make sure that you're burnishing some of the flakes between the top, or sorry, the bottom of the rim and the top line of your scales, so you're decorating that part as well. So now that our scales are colored, I'm just going to burnish the last of the flakes that are on my brush over here. I'm just going to make sure I haven't missed any spots, and it looks really good. So my next step is going to be to seal this again. You can use whatever sealer you want. I've been showing you guys Quick Coat. I like it because it's nice and thick. It's a really shiny sealer, glossy sealer, which I love. But I mean, you can use a spray sealer as well. You can use another brush on, like the Minwax polyacrylic. I like the Quick Coat as well because it's a little bit thicker, so you can get away with fewer coats of it. So for this, the reason why I want to coat it now before I add any of my glitter to my scales, like I've done here, is because if you remember, the Tack-It dries tacky. So if I'm going to be dumping a bunch of glitter on here, there might still be tacky spots where I did my scales, even though I've burnished it really, really well. And I don't want to have that. So I want to first seal it, make sure that it dries thoroughly, and then I will come back in with some Mod Podge and I will choose my scales, and I'll show you guys what colors I use for that as well. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be putting glitter on some select scales. So at this point, I kind of just decide sort of as I'm laying them down. I'll look first to see if there's any imperfections on any of my scales, if there's anything where I think, oh, I should maybe hide that. So here I actually have one scale where when I put my first coat of Quick Coat on the cardstock, too much Quick Coat had accumulated there and it left this like little weird bump. So I'm going to use this one as my starting scale, and then you won't see that anymore. So that's where I sort of said, if you do have a mistake with one of your scales, like whether you placed it a little wonky or something, you can always sort of go back and kind of pick that scale out and then cover that with glitter. So in order to do this, I'm first going to lay down some parchment paper so I can collect my glitter and I can put it back in my container. I'm going to be using Mod Podge for it. I'm going to be needing two different brushes. One is going to be at the back of my eyeshadow brush, which I use to apply my chameleons. I just have this small angled brush here. It's a perfect size. You can kind of measure if the size will work for you by doing a dry trial to see if, you know, like you like that size or if it's too big or anything like that. So this is a good size for me. It's just a small angled brush there. I have a little dish for my Mod Podge, and I also have a small sort of stiff brush, and I'm going to be using this to brush away the excess glitter when I sort of do my glitter dump on that section. So those are the materials I'm needing for this step. So I'm going to start off by taking my Mod Podge. I'm going to put a small amount into a dish here. And then I am going to take my angled brush and I'm going to dip it into my Mod Podge, and I'm actually going to do a very generous coat. So when I first started doing these, I was just doing a thin coat like you would if you were glittering a whole tumbler. And then I had watched a tutorial, which was the live that Angela Whaling did on the Pressing Images wholesale Facebook group. They do Friday Night Lives there. And Angela Whaling went on and she had shown what like the steps on how to make her sort of take on the geode. It's a really beautiful tumbler. So I'm going to call hers the angeode because it's really a unique take on it. And she was basically saying that you can load it up with Mod Podge if you're just doing like sort of like a smaller section, or if you're doing like the lines like she was, versus, you know, if you're just trying to get even coverage on a cup. So I started doing that and I really, really liked it because I find that I use less glitter this way. I can kind of get away with just that one coat of glitter, at least on my darker glitters. So basically you just go on here and you're going to trace out your scale. And I'm going to bring it right up to the rim on this. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of load that up with lots of adhesive here because I'm using a chunky glitter as well. And the first glitter color I'm going to use is the new So Fetch from Em and Cat, which is a champagne gold opal. It's kind of champagne dreams with some opal mixed into it. And it is absolutely stunning. And I'm just really gonna dump it on there. And then I'm going to take my other brush and I'm just going to brush away whatever didn't stick. And if you have some that for whatever reason doesn't want to leave your scale and it gets stuck there, that's okay too, because again, this is going to have a lot of glitter around it. It is a Whirlpool Mermaid style, so it's gonna, I kind of, when I was envisioning this tumbler and I was designing it, I was thinking it's kind of like the water like kicked up a bunch of glitter in different colors and whatnot, and that's sort of how I came up with how I wanted to do the back. So it's okay if you're gonna get some stray glitters in this part here. That's not gonna be a problem. But I do like to control whenever possible. All right. So that's that. So that's my first one. And if you want, you can press it down a little bit too, just to make it lay a little flatter. All right. Knock off any excess. And again, I'm going to list all of the colors that I used for this stage and also for the next one in the description section of this video, so you will be able to reference back to that. What's going on here? Put that around. And I'm just kind of trying to keep my area a little bit clean because I don't want to be contaminating my glitters with one color or another. All right. So now what I'm going to go in and I'm going to do is I'm going to let this fully dry, and I'm going to let this dry for a couple of hours again because that Mod Podge was on there so thick. And then I'm going to come in again with my quick coat, and I am just going to seal the scales with them, or the ones that have the glitter on them. I'm not going to do all of the scales again. I don't need to. I'm just going to go in and put quick coat on the scales that had glitter. And the reason for that is because I don't want it shifting all over the cup, but also because I don't want to have, I don't want to waste the product. And the reason why the scales are getting sealed at this point is because these are chunky glitters, especially things like the MLP, and chunky glitters are known to repel epoxy. So I want to make sure that I have sealed them really, really well. So I'll just go in, small brush, seal these up with, and I'm just going to show you the brush I'll use. I'm just going to use one like this. So it's not my Tack-It brush, but it is a synthetic bristle brush that's, you know, like it's very similar to the Tack-It brush, but because I'm not really worried about brush strokes because it's just a very small surface, this is just what I'm going to use for that. So now I want to start adding my base layer of glitter on the back side of the Mermaid Scale tumbler. So just to show you what the glitter looks like when it's raw, it's going to look something like this right here. Okay, so I use a mixture of chunkies and of extra fine or fine glitters to get that look. So around the outer edges, I'm using So Fetch, Champagne Dreams, MLP, Diamond Dust, Mermaid's Tail Chunky Mix. If this is no longer available, you can always go with Aurora Illusions, Purple Rain, Sparkle Face, Princess, Pretty Pegasus Mix, Cinderella, Sugar Crush, Breakfast at Tiffany's, My Little Pony Mix, and Wild Mauve. You can obviously change out any colors that you want to. This is just sort of the one that's been my go-to from the beginning. So I've mixed up just a little bit of epoxy. I do use the epoxy method. I've only mixed up a total of 5 milliliters, and I'm going to apply it a little bit thicker than I usually would for glitter because I'm going to be using those chunkies. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to warm up your cup a little bit. It just makes the epoxy spread a little bit smoother and more evenly. So I'm going to be doing that with a heat gun. You can use a heater if you have it, a hair dryer. I'm going to be using the low setting of the heat gun. I'm not going to concentrate the heat anywhere for too long because I don't want to burn my paint or my cup or cause any of the paint to bubble or any of my sealers to bubble or lift. So I'm just going to kind of do this until it feels warm to the touch. So that's warm now. So when I apply my epoxy, I am going to be bringing it over my scales just a little bit. So I'm going to first start by just sort of going between the scales. I'm going to take some of my epoxy and I am going to put it over the outer line of the scales as well. I'm going to make sure I get it all the way on the bottom and covering up that little ledge between the scales and the bottom of the tumbler. And I'm going to put just a little bit right along the rim. So when I do this, I start with my darkest color, which in this case is Mermaid's Tail. And I'm going to start about in the middle between these two scales. And I'm just going to start shaking it on. And my next color, I'm going to go with my lighter purple, which is going to be My Little Pony. And I'm just going to kind of come up and over that outer line that I did on the Mermaid's Tail. So if you can kind of see where I am. I'm going to do that on both sides. So my next color is going to be the Pretty Pegasus Mix, my lighter blue. And I'm going to go right back over where I just went with the My Little Pony mix. Okay, now I'm going to come in with some some Sugar Crush. And same thing, just kind of come in right on the outer part of what I just did. Okay, now I'm going to come in with Sparkle Face. And I'm just going to come right over where I did that last little line. All right, now I'm going to use a little bit of MLP. And I'm going to start coming over my scales now. I'm also going to kind of come over that bottom rim and the top rim a little bit. And now I'm going to come in with So Fetch, and I'm going to come right in on that scale line. And just as before, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start with my darker purple, and I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to go over where I had Mermaid's Tail with the dark purple, and I'm just going to kind of come in above it, and I'm just going to sprinkle that on. So this is the Purple Rain. Now I'll come in with my Wild Mauve, which is my lighter of the purples, and just like before, I'm going to come in right on the edge of the other purple and sort of pull that color out a little bit. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the Cinderella, the light blue, and I'm basically going to go over just that very edge of where I did the purple, and I'm just going to do this very, very lightly. Okay, now I'm going to come in with a little bit of Princess and kind of go over, oops, make sure you use the right side, and I'm just going to kind of go over very lightly. And this just gives it some of the same colors that are in that chameleon in those glitters as well. So you're kind of reflecting and playing with those same colors, which is why I chose the ones that I did. And I'm not necessarily looking for like straight blends. Like I'm kind of mixing some of these colors in with some of the other ones that I have. I just added a little bit of pink to lighten up some of that purple a bit. So it's really just like, this is kind of where you can use your eye and where you can kind of get the colors to do what you want them to do. And you get to kind of play with your own vision here. All right, then I have Breakfast at Tiffany's. I'm going to come in. This is an extra fine, but honestly, it really has the feel of an ultra fine. Like it comes out really fast. So if you're using this one, you got to be a little slower with it, a little bit more cautious. But it is a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous color. Now I'm going to skip over Diamond Dust for a second, and I'm going to go into Champagne Dreams, and just ever so lightly, I'm going to go over that scale line, that row on the outer edge. Okay, and because I like mine to be just a little bit more on the purple side, I'm going to come back in one more time with the Wild Mauve and just going to bring it right back over some of those blues and teals that we did, just to help fill any spaces there. All right, and then last but definitely not least, I'm going to come in with Diamond Dust. And I'm going to start here where the gold kind of meets those teals and fill it in with some of that Diamond Dust. Put it on the bottom. Do the same on the other side. Along the bottom rim. Along the top rim, and then lightly over the center as well. And then that is it for the base color of the glitter. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this harden, and I'm probably going to, well actually I'll show you how I press it down on the parchment paper, because I don't think I've uploaded that video on YouTube yet. So I'm just gonna take my tumbler. You can do this with like a small piece of parchment paper that you use to press down. Because of the shape of this tumbler, I'm just going to take my hand underneath and use it to kind of help press down the bottom glitters. And I'm only doing this because it's chunky, because I want to help those glitters like lay flat. And I'm literally just going to take it, and you can roll it. Don't slide it, but you can just roll it. You can take your paper and you can pull it up and over and press it. It's really however you want to do it. Don't be doing like a back and forward motion with it though. It's just a pressing down. And then I've got my glitters that are laying a little bit flatter, which is going to make it easier when it comes to sealing and epoxy. So once this is fully hardened, I'm going to take just a fan brush and very lightly just brush that off. And then I'm going to take some more quick coat, and I'm going to do 1 or 2 coats of quick coat to seal that up before I go in and do epoxy. And when I epoxy next, I'm going to show you guys how I add more of the glitter. All right, what I've done since I've last seen you is I applied one coat of Quick Coat to just the glitter, and then when that had dried, I applied another coat of the Quick Coat to the entire tumbler. You can use a spray sealer if that's what you feel more comfortable with. You can use polyacrylic if that's what you feel more comfortable with. I really like the finish that I get with the Quick Coat. I like that it's a little bit thicker than the polyacrylic, and I like Quick Coat better. It's my sealer of choice. So that is what I did. And then what I did was I mixed up about 10 milliliters total of epoxy, and I put a thin layer of epoxy on this tumbler, and I've let it turn now for about 20 minutes just so it's sort of setting up a little bit. If you like where you are right now, you don't have to go any further than this. You can just let this cure and then come in and join me on my next step. Or you can add a little bit more bling, which is what I'm going to be doing now. So when people look at my stuff, they always say like, oh, there's a lot of depth and a lot of layers. That's because it's built up. So I'm building up my color. So I'm going to show you what I did with another mermaid scale that I'm working on. And just so you can kind of see the difference in how that's looking when I'm building up my colors. There, let me see. This is wet, so I don't want to touch it. You can see here the vibrancy of those colors and the depth that I'm starting to achieve now versus what I have on my turner now, which is still quite pretty. So again, if you want to stop here and just add the pigments in the next step, that's totally fine. But I want to add a little bit more depth in my colors. So to do that, you can go back and you can reuse colors that you've already used. I'm going to add a little bit more color, and I'm going to revisit a couple of mine as well. So some of the colors I'm going to be adding is going to be Singing the Blues. So I made a chunky mix from different sizes. I'm not sure if Amy has the chunky mix available now, but I had just got a whole bunch of different sizes and mixed them together myself. I'm going to be adding some Nuclear Topaz, medium chunky. I have here a chunky mix of Champagne Dreams. This is coming soon to the site. At the time I've recorded this, it's not yet on the site, but that's what that one is. I'm coming back in with some more MLP. I'm going to be adding some Mystique, which is this beautiful holographic purple that's got some interesting shaped cuts in here, some like irregular cuts, which is just, it's really beautiful. And I'm also coming back in with some Diamond Dust. And what I've done is I've just put them in little, like the lids of my things, so I can just pick them up and kind of pinch them onto the tumbler as I go. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to focus on where I'm blending my glitter into my scales. So I'm going to start off with some MLP, and I'm just going to pinch it and kind of lightly add some onto this line, right, because I can still kind of see the line where my scales and my glitter met, and I'm wanting to hide that, so I'm coming in right now. And the reason why I let my epoxy set up for about 20 minutes or so first is to try to prevent any shifting that might occur, because this is wet epoxy and I'm trying to kind of keep some shifting is fine. I just didn't want it going all over the cup. I did torch this as well. I torched it as soon as I had applied it. I waited 5 minutes and then torched it. And then I definitely wanted to let that cool. I'm not going to be torching it anymore because, as you know, when you add heat to epoxy, it thins it and makes it more fluid. And I don't really want it to be shifting too much anymore. I honestly could have let my epoxy sit another 20 minutes, but this was just the window that I had with my children. So I would say anywhere between 20 to 40 minutes. 40 minutes will get you a little more set up. I might have a little more shifting. And I'm just going to rinse my fingers off between colors to kind of keep my fingers clean as I'm doing this. All right, so that was the MLP going right on over that line right where my scales met. And as I said, I could still see that. So if you could still see that for yourself, that's the line that I followed. Now I'm going to come in with my chunky mix of the Champagne Dreams, And I'm going to come right on the other side and kind of overlapping that line as well to start blending these guys here out. And I'm not too worried if I do get some of this on my scales, because again, my idea was with the Whirlpool was that it was kind of twisting and churning and kicking up colors. So it doesn't need to be perfect. And then if you see some that you kind of want to move on over because it's too far into your scales, or I had here where I spilled some, just take a tool and you can just push it back into your line a little bit. And that's the really nice part about doing this with epoxy, is that you get this extra play time and working time. So I'm singing the blues, and I'm just gonna kind of add a little bit here, right where I have the deepest part of my purple. This one here has mostly like a green and blue color shift, and I'm kind of trying to mimic some of those deeper water kind of colors, and purple is my favorite color, which is why I kind of chose purple for the main part of the mermaid. So you can always change up your colors. These are just ones that I thought looked really nice together, and the purple plays really nicely with some of these deeper water kind of colors as well. So I'm not going to fill any area. I'm just going to kind of add it as this little accent detail. Nuclear topaz, and kind of right where I did those colors, I'm going to bring in some more of that blue, and this is an absolutely gorgeous blue. Mystique, which is that beautiful holographic purple. So this color I'm keeping more to my middle, where my purple was the deepest anyway. Just again to add a little bit of layering to those colors. I'm not filling everything. I still want some of my colors from the bottom to be pulling through, but I definitely want to just add a little bit more pop and a little more depth and dimension. Diamond dust, and I'm going to come in with this color, sort of focusing again on that line, that blend between my glitter and my scales. I wanted to try these. These are new for me. I've never used them before. They are the holographic circles. These are the purple ones. I also have ones with like a pink and purple color shift. I'm gonna look up what they're called. I can't remember offhand. I think it was just the like circles, but I'm gonna double check that. And these ones here, they are a little bit thick. So you want to kind of make sure that you sort of press them down into your design. And I'm just going to add just a few of them here and there, because I kind of thought with the circle shape it was looking like bubbles. So if you remember from last time, what I did was I took parchment paper and I kind of wrapped it up in that. That's not going to work this time because I've got too much exposed epoxy. I don't want to do that. So in this instance, I'm just going to take a smaller amount of parchment paper and I'm going to wrap it around my finger, and I'm going to press it down wherever I feel, or sorry, wherever I've added chunky glitters, to kind of make them sit flatter. And that will make life easier on future coats. And I'm not worried about getting some of the transfer from the color on here and then patting it into different color lines, because it's just going to help add to that sort of churning water mix. I actually kind of like having just hits of a little bit of blue and green in with the gold, or a little bit of gold in with the blue and the green. All right. All right, perfect. So I am going to let this spin now. It's already been spinning for probably half an hour, so I'm going to wait another 2.5 hours, and then I am going to come in with a flood coat and seal that layer up, so then that way I can get it ready for adding the ink swirls and everything. All right, so apparently I didn't hit the record button, so I'm gonna have to kind of go back over what I did. So basically what I've done here, I had to do 2 flood coats after the last coat of glitter I applied, because of the fact that this is a rather textured cup. So I've used the 100-pound cardstock, then I layered that with chunky glitters. These circle glitters that I have on here, or shapes that I have on here, are thicker cut as well. So there was definitely a lot more height and texture coming onto this cup. So this cup is going to be a chunkier cup, and you're always going to have that when you're doing this much layering of coloring and design. So what I like to do next, so what I did was I put a very thin coat of epoxy on it. I don't want it to be too thick, because I don't want it to be running my glitters, my inks and dyes like crazy. But I want it to have some movement, so then that way when I'm putting things, it'll still have sort of a fluid look to it. So I did put on that, then I torched it and I let it kind of turn while I mixed together in some epoxy, various epoxy pigments. So I have here from Armor Art, white epoxy pigment. I have black epoxy pigment. And I also used light green. So these were all CC DIY products. So if you are in Canada, you can get these exclusively from Cat Glitter Factory. I also mixed into one of my dishes this this light purple chameleon powder. It is absolutely gorgeous. It doesn't go on the cup as opaque as the other ones do, because it is a powder. But I can't exactly remember the name. I will link it in the description. I think it's light purple, but I could be wrong. And I mix them in just using this well-loved silicone stir stick, which also I got from Cat Glitter Factory. And what I started doing is I started just applying this coloring to where my glitter is kind of meeting my scales. So again, on that same line, like where I wanted to focus some of my glitters more to kind of ease that transition between the two. And I will put a little bit of this on some of the darker areas of the tumbler as well, but I don't want to overpower it, because I actually really like, this is my favorite tumbler I've done with the glitter on the inside of it, and I really like it, and I don't want to cover it up too much. So I'm just going to add just little bits there. Don't forget to do your bottoms. And then when I switch colors, I just take a lint-free cloth and I just wipe it off. So next I'm going to want to go in with my other color. The other two are the shades. This is my color, and this is the light green. And I'm going to mix it up just a little bit more. And again, using this silicone tool, I'm just going to kind of come in, and you can see how that is much more opaque than the pigment I just did. Now I don't want to be overpowering with my colors, but I do want to have them, you know, like kind of hit here and there in certain areas. And the nice thing about working with these is that you can always come back and you can pull some of that color away if you're finding it's too much. And I do that a lot. I add and I pull away and I add and I pull away. So now I'm going to come in with my white and my black, and I'm going to switch my tool up on this. This is a, I want to say it was a dabber tool or something. I got it on Amazon. I'll see if I can find the link for it, but these are silicones. They're really easy to keep clean. This one here just has that nice pointy top, and this one here is really good for scraping if I decide to pull some of the epoxy color that I add off. So I am just going to come in, and with my little side, the pointy side, I'm going to take just a tiny amount of black, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of just roll that color on. So I'm turning the tool between my fingers to kind of make it so that you get more pigmentation in some areas and less in others. So it's kind of dropping and picking up the color. And especially with the black, I mean, it's very easy to overpower with black. So you just need a tiny little bit, a little wee bit goes such a long way. And then I'll often also go back through it and stretch it out even more. And I'm going to add just the tiniest bit into the center because I really want my glitters coming through. My glitters, they're so stunning on this cup that I don't want to block them too much. So now I'm gonna take my lint-free cloth, wipe that off between, just like that. And I'm gonna come in with the white now. And if you start scraping off some of the colors that you've added, you can either play with them and put them on other parts of the cup, or you can just wipe them off. So now what I'm going to do is, when that comes back around again, I'll show you. I'm finding it a little bit thick in certain areas, so I'm going to take this side here, and I'm going to scrape it a bit. So just kind of right in here. Just scrape some of it off. And then here, I'm just going to pull it. And again, this is where you really get to play. This is where you get to be a little bit more artistic and have a little bit more fun with it. I don't like that it's covering my circles, so I'm gonna... So the original idea behind adding the white into this was because I was picturing water churning. It's kind of adapted a bit since the first one that I've done. I had more blues in my original pieces. Now I'm going more towards those purples that I think are very mermaid, which also happen to be my favorite color. And then if you're starting to see areas looking cloudy because inks are covering spots where you want to see the glitter below, you can pull. You just go in and scrape that off. So I'm probably not going to want to really add any more color onto this. But the one thing that I do want to add just a little bit more of, because it is my absolute favorite glitter in the world, I'm going to sprinkle just a tiny bit more MLP in a couple places. And again, by doing this, I am layering the color. So I've got the pigments on top of the glitters, which are on top of other glitters, and now on top of that even, I'm going to sprinkle ever so lightly in just a few areas. And it's really like, I want to be subtle here. I don't want to do too much, but just a couple. what? Now I'm happy with it. So now what I'm going to do with this tumbler is essentially it's done. There's no personalization on these ones. You always can add a name if you want to, or a small couple words saying or something. I thought about adding mermaid soul or something to it. But these are pretty well done being decorated now. So now all that I need to do is I am just going to go in and I will epoxy these until smooth. There is a lot of texture on this, so I know I'm definitely going to come back in with a flood coat, but I'm going to wait a little bit longer than I usually do. I'm going to push it to that 5-hour limit because I want to have these inks and pigments that I've just sort of marbled in there, or Milky Way, whatever it is you want to call it, that I've put into this tumbler. I want that to set up before I really go ahead and add any more epoxy to it onto like a tackier coat. So that will be mostly set up, but it's still it's still within the recoat window allowance. So I will do one more coat then, and then I will sand it, probably do another coat, and then I will check to see whether or not it is going to require my hand sander to kind of smooth it out because of all this texture, or if it is good at that point. But that's sort of something that you'll know based on how many layers of glitter and color and the type of cardstock you used. That will depend on all of that. So there it is. Thank you for watching, guys. If you like what you saw, please give this video a thumbs up. If you are new to my channel and want to be informed of future videos I post, please be sure to subscribe to my channel by clicking on my logo above and giving that little notification bell a tickle. If you want to check out more of my videos, you can select the video right there next to me, or you can check out one of my playlists. Thanks again for watching, and I will be back soon with more tumbler tips and tutorials.